Okay, picture this. You've spent years, maybe a decade, working in public service, teaching, nursing, maybe for the government. It could be a nonprofit you really believe in. And all that time, you've got this massive weight, right? Student loan debt.
Mm-hmm. It's a heavy one for so many people.
And then imagine, after all that commitment, after 10 years, poof, hundreds of thousands of dollars potentially, just gone, wiped out.
Wow.
That feeling, it must be incredible, like beyond winning the lottery almost.
Oh, absolutely. It's more than just relief. It's fundamentally life-changing for a lot of folks. It's the freedom to keep doing that important work without this, crushing financial burden hanging over them.
And this isn't just a dream, right? For hundreds of thousands of public servants, it's real. It's the result of a specific federal program.
Exactly. And that's what we're digging into today.
We are doing a deep dive into the Public Service Loan Forgiveness Program, or PSLF. We want to figure out, what exactly is it? How does it actually work in practice? And critically, what are the absolute must-know details for you if you're trying to navigate this? Because it sounds complex.
It definitely has its complexities.
Yeah.
So our mission today is to really unpack the sources we've gathered. We've got the official stuff from federal student aid, some info from dc.gov, insights from groups like the National Council of Nonprofits, and Lending Tree.
And importantly, we've also got real stories, right? From the trenches.
Yes, and this is fascinating. We have firsthand accounts, discussions, even frustrations, straight from the Reddit PSLF community, people sharing exactly what they went through.
That's invaluable.
It really is. So we're going to pull out the key information, understand all the moving parts, shine a light on the common pitfalls, and give you the crucial details. That includes recent updates and the kind of borrower experiences that honestly bring this whole thing to life.
All right, let's jump in. The core idea behind PSLF. Why does this program even exist? What's the big picture?
Well, fundamentally, PSLF is a federal program designed to forgive the remaining balance on specific types of federal student loans.
Mm-hmm.
The key condition is that you have to work full-time in a public service job for a significant period.
So it's basically the government saying, hey, we see you doing this important work, teaching kids, caring for patients, working for the city, helping people through a nonprofit.
Work that maybe doesn't always pay the big bucks.
Right. And we want to help. Stick with it for 10 years, make your payments, and we'll forgive the rest of that federal student debt. Is that about right?
That's the essence of it. The goal is really twofold. One, incentivize people to choose and stay in these vital public service careers. Two, provide meaningful debt relief as a sort of thank you for that commitment. It's intended as a win-win.
Mm-hmm.
Good for the borrower, good for society, because we need people in those jobs.
Okay, so that's the why. What about the how, the basic mechanics? How do you actually get this forgiveness?
Right, the mechanics boil down to hitting three key things simultaneously over time. You need to make 120 qualifying monthly payments. That's 10 years worth.
10 years, okay.
While you're making those payments, you must be working full-time for a qualifying employer.
Employer qualification, got it.
And crucially, those payments have to be made while you're enrolled in a specific type of repayment plan, usually an income-driven one.
Okay, so 120 qualifying payments while working for the right employer, while on the right payment plan. Hit all three for 10 years.
And the remaining balance on your eligible federal direct loans can be forgiven. And a big plus, currently that forgiven amount isn't treated as taxable income by the federal government.
Wow, tax-free forgiveness, that's huge. Okay, 120 payments, 10 years.
Mm-hmm.
Let's start with that first big hurdle you mentioned, the employer. Who counts as a qualifying employer? This sounds like a potential minefield.
You're absolutely right to flag that. This is often where the first bit of confusion comes in for people.
Yeah.
The single most important thing to understand here is that PSLF qualification depends almost entirely on who your employer is. It's about the type of organization.
Not your specific job title.
Generally, no. It's not about what you do day-to-day within the organization. It's about the organization itself.
So if I'm an accountant working for a nonprofit hospital versus a for-profit tech company.
Exactly. The accountant at the nonprofit hospital might be eligible based on the employer, while the accountant at the tech company likely wouldn't be, even if they do the exact same accounting tasks. It's the employer's status that matters.
Okay, so what types of employers generally count? What do the sources say?
The sources lay out a few main categories. First, government organizations. This is pretty broad: federal, state, local, or even tribal government agencies. If you work directly for the government at any level, you're probably on the right track employer-wise. Like the dc.gov source confirms, working for the DC government counts.
Makes sense. Government jobs, what else?
Second, Tax-exempt nonprofit organizations under Section 501c3 of the Internal Revenue Code. This is a really big category. It covers most charities, private nonprofit universities, nonprofit hospitals, foundations, lots of different groups.
501c3, okay, that covers a lot of ground. Any other nonprofits?
Yes, there's a third category. Other types of nonprofit organizations that aren't 501c3s, but do provide specific qualifying public services. The services mentioned are things like public health, public education, public safety, emergency management, services for the disabled or elderly. It's a defined list.
So a non-501c nonprofit needs to fit into one of those specific service buckets.
Correct. And fourth, full-time AmeriCorps or Peace Corps volunteer positions also count as qualifying employment.
Okay, government, 501c3, certain other nonprofits providing specific services, AmeriCorps, Peace Corps. Now, you said generally the job title doesn't matter. Is there any time it does?
There's one specific carve-out mentioned, mainly for nonprofits with a religious affiliation. If your job duties specifically involve things like religious instruction, worship services, or proselytizing, the time spent purely on those activities might not count towards the full-time requirement, even if the organization itself is a qualifying 501c3.
Ah, okay. So if you're, say, a teacher at a nonprofit religious school, your teaching hours count, but maybe not hours spent leading chapel.
That's the kind of distinction they're making.
Right.
But for most roles in qualifying organizations, the administrator, the nurse, the social worker, the lawyer, it's the employer status that's the key.
Got it. What about the full-time part? How is that defined? Is it 40 hours a week?
It's generally defined as meeting your employer's own definition of full-time or working at least 30 hours per week, whichever is greater.
Whichever is greater. So if my employer says full-time is 35 hours, I need 35. If they say it's 40, I need 40. If they don't have a definition or it's less than 30, then 30 hours is the minimum.
That's the idea. 30 hours per week is the floor, essentially, unless your employer requires more for full-time status.
What if you piece together work, like maybe 2 part-time jobs at different qualifying nonprofits?
That's allowed. The sources confirm you can combine the hours from multiple qualifying part-time jobs. As long as the combined hours meet that 30-hour per week minimum threshold, you can qualify.
That's good flexibility. Does volunteering count? If I volunteer 15 hours and work 15 paid hours at a nonprofit?
No, unfortunately, it has to be paid employment. Unpaid volunteer hours don't count towards the PSLF full-time requirement.
Paid work only. Okay. This sounds like you really need to be sure about your employer status. You can't just guess, right? How do you confirm?
Absolutely don't guess. This is step one, really. Federal Student Aid has a crucial tool for this on studentaid.gov. It's called the PSLF Help Tool.
The Help Tool. Okay.
You can use this tool to search for your employer by their Employer Identification Number, EIN. It maintains a database of employers that have already been reviewed and deemed qualifying, eligible, or ineligible.
So you plug in your employer's info and it tells you.
Ideally, yes. If your employer is in the database as qualifying, you're good to go on that front. If they're listed as ineligible, well, that's important information too.
What if they're not listed at all? Or if you think the database is wrong?
If they're not listed, it doesn't automatically mean they don't qualify. It might just mean no one has submitted them for review yet. You can use the Help tool to submit your employer's information for review by the Department of Education. And if you think the determination is wrong, there are ways to request reconsideration, especially with the newer regulations.
So using that PSLF Help tool early and probably regularly seems like a really good idea.
Highly recommended. Check your employer as soon as you think you might pursue PSLF and maybe recheck periodically or if your organization undergoes changes.
Okay, employer verified. Step 1 checked. Now, the loans themselves, you mentioned eligible federal direct loans. Does that mean not all federal loans qualify?
Correct. This is another major tripping point for borrowers. Historically, and still primarily, only loans made under the William D. Ford Federal Direct Loan Program qualify for PSLF.
Direct loans. So that's the standard ones, like direct subsidized and unsubsidized loans you get for undergrad or grad school.
Yes. Also direct PLUS loans, which include grad PLUS loans for graduate students and parent PLUS loans for parents borrowing for their children's education. And importantly, direct consolidation loans.
Okay, so the direct loan family. What about older federal loans? I know some people have loans from way back.
Right. Older loan types, specifically those from the Federal Family Education Loan Program, FFEL loans, and Federal Perkins loans, do not originally qualify for PSLF forgiveness on their own.
FFEL and Perkins loans are out. So if you have those and you're working the right job, you're just stuck.
Not necessarily stuck, but you need to take an extra, very specific step. Those older FFER and Perkins loans can become eligible for PSLF if you consolidate them.
Consolidate them into what?
Into a new direct consolidation loan. Basically, you bundle those ineligible loans into a new loan that is part of the direct loan program.
Ah, consolidation. Okay, this sounds critical, but I feel like I've heard warnings about consolidation in PSLF. Can it mess things up?
It absolutely can, and this is where things get quite nuanced, especially with recent changes. Let's break this down carefully.
Please do.
Okay, the old rule, the one that was in place for years and is noted in sources like the dc.gov one, was pretty harsh. If you consolidated non-direct loans like FFEL or Perkins, only the payments you made after the consolidation on the new direct consolidation loan would count towards your 120 for PSLF.
So if I had made, say, 3 years of payments on an old Perkins loan while working for a nonprofit and then I consolidated it, those 3 years of payments were just lost. For PSLF purposes, my clock reset to 0.
Under the old standard rules, yes, that's exactly how it worked.
Yeah.
Payments made before consolidating non-direct loans didn't count.
Ouch. That's rough. Has that changed?
This is where the really big news comes in, highlighted by the National Council of Nonprofits source. There have been temporary waivers and, more importantly, a major one-time payment count adjustment currently being implemented by the Department of Education. This adjustment is expected to be completed around September 2024.
A payment count adjustment.
Yeah.
What does that do?
It's designed to go back and give borrowers credit towards PSLF and also towards IDR forgiveness for past periods of repayment, even if they were on the wrong loan type, like FFEL or Perkins, or on the wrong repayment plan, or even during certain periods of forbearance or deferment. The key condition is that you must have had qualifying employment during those past months.
Whoa, wait. So this adjustment might mean those 3 years of payments I hypothetically made on my Perkins loan before consolidating, they might count now, even though the old rule said no.
Exactly. That's the potential power of this one-time adjustment. It could retroactively credit those past periods, provided your employment qualified at the time. This directly counteracts that old consolidation, resets the clock logic for past payments on non-direct loans. It's a huge potential benefit.
That is huge. So for anyone with older loans who consolidated or maybe still has them, this adjustment is critical.
Absolutely critical. It could add years' worth of payments to their account.
Okay, so the adjustment might fix the past problem for non-direct loans. But what about consolidating direct loans? Let's say I have a couple of direct loans already, and I've made, say, 5 years of PSLF qualifying payments on them. Should I consolidate them together, maybe with a new loan?
This is where you still need to be really careful, as the lending tree source points out. Consolidating existing direct loans that already have a history of qualifying PSLF payments. That could still potentially cause you to lose credit for those payments.
Even with the adjustment?
The adjustment is primarily aimed at correcting past issues with non-direct loans, incorrect payment plans, and certain deferments forbearances. While it might address certain scenarios where direct loan consolidation previously reset counts, the general advice, especially from sources like Lending Tree, is still cautious. Consolidating direct loans with existing PSLF progress might reset the count on the portion of the new consolidated loan that represents those old loans, unless the adjustment specifically covers your situation.
So the rule seems to be consolidating non-direct loans, FFEL, Perkins, parent PLUS, is usually necessary to make them eligible, and the adjustment might give you back credit for past payments. But consolidating direct loans that you've already made progress on is potentially risky and could set you back unless you're very early in the process.
That's a very good summary of the current, somewhat confusing landscape. The advice often given is, if you have non-direct loans needing consolidation for PSLF, consider consolidating only those loans, leaving your existing direct loans with PSLF history separate if possible to protect their count.
Okay.
Okay.
That makes sense. Preserve the counts you already have on direct loans if you can. This sounds like you absolutely need to know exactly what loans you have. How do you find that out for sure?
The definitive source is your account on the federal student aid website, studentaid.gov. Log in there, go to your dashboard or loan details section. It will clearly list every federal loan you have, the type, direct, FFEL, Perkins, the servicer, the balance, everything. That's ground zero for figuring out your situation.
Studentaid.gov. Got it. Okay, so qualifying employer, check. Eligible loans, maybe needing consolidation, check. Now the third piece, the payments themselves.
Yeah.
120 qualifying payments. What makes a payment qualifying?
Right. Several things have to line up for a payment to count. First, the timing. It has to have been made after October 1st, 2007. That's when the PSLF program officially began. Payments before that date don't count.
Okay, post-October 2007, what about the payment amount and when you make it?
It needs to be for the full amount that was due according to your bill for that month, and you need to make it on time, defined as no later than 15 days after your due date.
Full amount within 15 days of the due date? Seems reasonable. But you mentioned something earlier being absolutely critical about the payment, the repayment plan.
Yes, this is arguably the biggest reason why people historically didn't qualify even when they thought they should have. For the vast majority of those 120 payments, you must be enrolled in and making payments under a qualifying income-driven repayment IDR plan.
IDR plan. Why is that so essential? What if I was just making my standard payments for 10 years?
Think about how PSLF works. It forgives the remaining balance after 120 payments. A standard 10-year repayment plan is, by design, set up to pay off your entire loan in exactly 120 payments, 10 years. So if you're on the standard plan, after 120 payments, there's usually no balance left to forgive.
Okay. That clicks. The standard plan pays it off too fast.
Exactly. IDR plans, on the other hand, calculate your monthly payment based on your income and family size. For many public servants, this results in a payment that's lower than the standard payment. So after making 120 of these lower IDR payments, there's often still a significant loan balance remaining. That's the balance PSLF is designed to forgive.
Got it. So you need to be on an IDR plan so there's potentially something left to forgive after 10 years. Which IDR plans count?
The main qualifying IDR plans listed in the courses are income-based repayment, IBR, pay-as-you-earn, PAYE, the Saving on a Valuable Education SEE plan, which is the newest one, and replace the old repay plan, and income contingent repayment, ICR. Generally, payments under any of these should count towards PSLF.
IBR, PAYE, Save Jailover. And which plans are definitely out, the ones that won't qualify?
The standard repayment plan, the 10-year one, unless it's equal to or greater than what your IDR payment would be, which is rare, the graduated repayment plan, where payments start low and increase, and the extended repayment plan, which stretches payments over a longer period, like 20-25 years. Payments made under these plans generally do not count towards PSLF, although the one-time count adjustment might give credit for past periods on these plans if employment qualified. But going forward, you need to be on IDR.
Okay, need to be on IDR. Now, here's something interesting from the sources. What about times when you weren't actually making payments, like during a deferment or forbearance? Historically, those didn't count, right?
Right. Historically, most periods of deferment or forbearance where you weren't required to pay didn't count towards the 120. But this is another area where the rules have become significantly more borrower-friendly, partly due to the recent regulations and that big payment count adjustment.
So some non-payment periods can count now, even if $0 were paid.
Yes, certain specific types of deferment and forbearance can count towards your 120, provided, and this is key, you are still employed full-time by a qualifying employer during that specific month or period of deferment forbearance.
Yeah.
You have to certify your employment for those periods.
Okay, so qualifying employment is still essential even during non-payment periods. Which types of deferment or forbearance might count?
The sources list several. Deferments related to cancer treatment, economic hardship, typically for up to 3 years, military service, post-active duty service for students, also certain forbearances like those for AmeriCorps service, National Guard duty, or participation in the Department of Defense Student Loan Repayment Program.
And what about the big one, the COVID payment pause?
Yes. Crucially, the sources confirm that the months during the COVID-19 payment pause, which started under the CARES Act in March 2020 and lasted quite a while, do generally count towards PSLF. As long as you maintain qualifying full-time employment during those months, you got credit towards your 120 even though your payments were automatically paused at $0.
That's massive. That gave people years of credit potentially without having to pay.
It was a huge benefit and relief for millions of borrowers in public service. And there's even some discussion on Reddit about certain other administrative forbearances potentially counting, like if you're put in forbearance while waiting for your IDR application to be processed, especially if those forbearance periods meet certain criteria under the new rules or the count adjustment. It's complex, but the door is open for more non-payment periods to count than ever before.
Okay, so the payment picture is need a 100, mostly on an IDR plan, but certain deferments and forbearances, especially the COVID pause, can count if you kept your qualifying job. This seems like a lot to keep track of over 10 years. How do you actually prove all this to the government and monitor your progress?
This brings us to a really vital piece of the process, certifying your employment and tracking everything. The absolute key document here is the Public Service Loan Forgiveness Employment Certification Form. often called the ECF.
The ECF, okay. Is this something you just fill out once at the very end when you apply for forgiveness?
You could theoretically wait and submit all your employment proof with your final application after 120 payments. But that is highly discouraged by basically everyone, the Department of Ed, the sources, and especially borrowers who've been through it.
Why? What's the benefit of doing it earlier?
The strong recommendation is to submit an ECF annually and also anytime you leave a qualifying job.
Annually, and when you change jobs. Why so often?
Because submitting the ECF is how you officially tell the Department of Education and your loan servicer, hey, I worked for this qualifying employer during this period. When they process and approve your ECFs, they verify your employer qualifies and then review the payments you made during that certified period to see if they count towards PSLF.
Ah, so it triggers a review of your payment count for that specific time.
Exactly. It allows your servicer, which is often Mohila, the main servicer for PSLF these days, to update your official count of qualifying payments. Doing this annually lets you see your progress in black and white. More importantly, it helps you catch any potential problems early.
Like what kind of problem?
Like maybe your employer wasn't coded correctly in their system. Or maybe you were accidentally on the wrong repayment plan for a few months. Or maybe your payments weren't recorded properly. If you find out about an issue after 1 year, you have 9 years left to fix it. If you wait 10 years and then find out your first 7 years didn't count, that's devastating.
Oof. Yeah, that makes total sense. Certify early, certify often, catch problems while there's time to fix them.
Precisely. The sources also really emphasize keeping your own meticulous records. Copies of every ECF you submit, confirmation that it was received and processed, records of your payments, pay stubs verifying employment dates, copies of your loan statements. Keep everything.
Because the system isn't perfect.
Let's just say the Reddit experiences strongly suggest that having your own backup documentation can be absolutely crucial if discrepancies arise with the servicer's count or records down the line. Be your own best advocate.
Okay, keep good records. Is there a tool to help manage this ECF process?
Yes, that same PSLF help tool on studentaid.gov that we mentioned for checking employers is also the main portal for managing your ECFs. It helps you fill out the form correctly, can electronically send it to your employer for their signature in many cases, and lets you submit it directly to the Department of Education. It integrates with your loan data. It's really the central hub for PSLF management.
Okay. PSLF help tool for employer check and ECF submission. Got it. All right, let's fast forward. You've done everything right. You've worked 10 plus years for a qualifying employer. You had to write direct loans or consolidated correctly. You were on an IDR plan. You made 120 plus qualifying payments, including maybe some forbearance months. And you've been certifying your employment regularly. You finally think you've hit that magic number 120. What's the final step? Applying for the actual forgiveness.
Yes. Once you believe you have made your 120th qualifying payment, you can submit the official PSLF application for forgiveness. This is often the same form as the ECF. You just check a different box indicating you think you're eligible for forgiveness now.
And when you submit that final application, do you still need to be working at a qualifying job? Or could you quit right after payment 120?
That's a key detail.
Yeah.
You must still be employed by a qualifying employer at the time you submit your application for forgiveness. You can't make your 120th payment, quit your job the next day, and then apply a week later. You need to be currently employed in public service when you apply.
Okay, still employed when applying. What happens then? You submit the form and wait. What does that final stage look like based on those Reddit stories?
Yeah, the Reddit community provides some really vivid human insights here. People who have reached the finish line describe a few common milestones. Often, the first sign is seeing something change on their studentaid.gov account. They sometimes refer to green banners appearing, indicating the system recognizes they've reached 120 qualifying payments.
Green banners. After a decade of work, seeing that must feel unreal.
I can only imagine. Pure relief, maybe some disbelief, intense anticipation. After the green banners, the next big step reported is receiving an official approval notice from studentaid.gov itself. People affectionately call this the golden letter.
The golden letter. That's the official thumbs up from the government.
Seems to be, yes. That letter confirms they've been approved for PSLF discharge.
Okay, golden letter received. What happens next? Does the debt just vanish?
Not quite instantly. After the Department of Education approves it, sends the golden letter, they notify the loan servicer again, usually Mohila. The servicer then has to process the forgiveness on their end. Users describe this period as anxiously checking their Mohila account balance, waiting for it to drop to zero.
Refresh, refresh, refresh.
Pretty much. And then finally the balance zeroes out on the servicer site. And shortly after that, the servicer typically sends out its own formal letter confirming the loan discharge and that the balance is now zero.
Okay, so the flow seems to be hit 120 payments, maybe see green banners on studentaid.gov, get the golden letter from studentaid.gov and see the balance zeros out on the servicer's Mohila website, get the final confirmation letter from the servicer.
That's the sequence reported by many successful borrowers on Reddit. It seems studentaid.gov gives the official approval, and the servicer executes the discharge.
How long does that final part take? From hitting 120 or getting the golden letter to seeing the zero balance, are we talking weeks, months?
Based on the Reddit accounts, it seems variable, but potentially surprisingly quick once the final approval comes through. Some users reported seeing their balance zeroed out just days after getting the golden letter. Others mentioned maybe a week or two between seeing initial signs on studentaid.gov and getting the letter. It seems the long part is the 10 years leading up to it. The final processing, once triggered, can happen relatively fast for many, though not always.
That's encouraging for people nearing the end. Now, what if someone kept paying after they hit their 120th qualifying payment, maybe because they weren't sure or the processing took time? Can they get those extra payments back?
Yes, that's another point confirmed by users on Reddit. If you made payments beyond the 120 required for forgiveness, you are generally entitled to a refund for those overpayments.
Oh, cool. So you get the forgiveness and potentially money back.
Potentially, yes. However, users also note that getting these refunds can sometimes be a separate, slower process that happens after the main loan forgiveness is finalized. So you might get your forgiveness letter, but the refund check or direct deposit could take longer to arrive. It's possible, but patience might be needed.
Okay, refunds possible but might take time. We've laid out the rules, the process, the potential happy ending. But let's be real, the sources, especially the Reddit ones, paint a picture of this being, well, not always a smooth ride. What are the common problems, the pitfalls, the frustrations that people actually face trying to navigate this PSLF labyrinth?
You're right, labyrinth is a good word for it sometimes. I think one of the biggest pitfalls is just assuming it's simple. Someone hears, work in public service, get loans forgiven, and they don't dig into the very specific requirements for the employer, the loan type, and the repayment plan. They miss a crucial detail early on.
We've hit those big ones already, having the wrong kind of loans, like FFEL, and not consolidating them, or being on the wrong repayment plan, like the standard or graduated plan instead of an IDR plan. Those seem like fundamental roadblocks.
Absolutely. If you don't have eligible direct loans and aren't making payments on a qualifying IDR plan, you're generally not making progress towards PSLF, no matter how dedicated you are to your public service job. Another huge mistake is not verifying the employer early using the help tool, and crucially not submitting those ECFs regularly.
Waiting 10 years to find out your employer didn't count.
Yeah, nightmare scenario. Finding out year one is much better. Another thing, kind of counterintuitive, paying extra on your loans.
How is paying extra a pitfall? Isn't paying down debt faster usually good?
Usually, yes, but not for PSLF. PSLF forgiveness is based on making 120 qualifying monthly payments, not on paying a certain total amount. If you're on an IDR plan, your required payment is calculated based on your income. Paying more than that required amount in a given month does not make you eligible for forgiveness any sooner. You still need 120 separate monthly payments. Overpaying just reduces the amount that will eventually be forgiven.
Okay. So stick to the calculated IDR payment amount. Don't pay extra if PSLF is your goal.
Right. But maybe the single biggest source of frustration, the one that comes up again and again in the Reddit discussions, is the whole experience of dealing with the student loan servicers, particularly Mohila, since they handle the vast majority of PSLF accounts now.
What kind of issues are people reporting with the servicers? It sounds like a running theme.
Oh, it is. People report a whole range of administrative headaches, things like incredibly long wait times on the phone, sometimes hours, just to ask a question, having to submit their ECFs multiple times because the previous ones seemed to get lost in the shuffle or weren't processed correctly. And a huge one, constant confusion and discrepancies over their qualifying payment counts.
The count being different on different websites.
Exactly. They see one number, hopefully getting close to 120 on the official studentaid.gov tracker, but then they log into their Mohila account and it shows a much lower number, causing panic.
I can imagine. That would be incredibly stressful.
It really is. And compounding that stress, some users have shared stories of seeing their balance actually drop to zero on studentaid.gov. They think, yes, it happened, only to have the balance reappear later on Mohila's site.
No, that's awful. Like forgiveness dangling and then snatched back.
It sounds like an emotional roller coaster. leading to immense anxiety and fear that the forgiveness they worked so hard for is being denied or rescinded due to some error.
Wow. What else? Any other specific servicer issues?
There's talk about difficulties with complex processes, like buyback. That's where, under certain conditions, you might be able to make retroactive payments for past periods where you had qualifying employment, but were in a non-qualifying forbearance or deferment to make those months count. But users describe the buyback process itself as being really difficult request, getting closed without explanation, needing to provide tons of documentation like old tax transcripts, having to file formal complaints or feedback cases just to get movement.
So it sounds like dealing with a servicer requires a ton of patience, persistence, and maybe keeping really, really good records yourself.
Absolutely. The advice threaded through the Reddit discussions is be your own advocate, document everything, follow up relentlessly but politely, be prepared for bureaucracy. People share their frustrations openly, sometimes mentioning things like poor customer service ratings for the servicer and detailing the steps they've taken, filing complaints with the official FSA ombudsman, even reaching out to their senators or representatives to highlight what seem like systemic problems.
Wow, people are really having to fight for this sometimes. What about just basic communication? Do people know when things are happening with their account?
That's another source of anxiety. There are discussions about whether critical updates like the final forgiveness approval, the golden letter, arrive via email, or if they just appear silently in the online account portals. People worry about missing a crucial notification.
Yeah, you wouldn't want to miss that email. And does this mess affect credit reports at all?
There was at least one mention of a user finding discrepancies between the payment status or due dates shown on their credit report versus what Mohila was showing, raising concerns about data consistency between the servicers and the credit bureaus. Just another layer of potential confusion. But beyond all the technical and administrative frustrations, what really comes through in those Reddit posts is the emotional weight of the whole journey. You see people posting about literally crying tears of joy when they finally see that zero balance. They use words like shock, disbelief, freedom. It's clearly life-altering. But right alongside that joy, you see the echoes of the struggle, people calling it long PIA, pain of the, talking about jumping through so many hoops, the endless waiting, and that underlying fear that something would go wrong at the last minute and the forgiveness would be ripped away.
It's such a mix of incredible relief and incredible frustration. Hearing those success stories, though, someone getting $58,000 forgiven, another $72,000, one person mentioned nearly $400,000, that really drives home why people endure the process.
It absolutely does. It underscores the immense value of the program, but also validates the challenges people face in actually achieving that outcome. It's a testament to their persistence.
Okay, let's revisit consolidation one more time, because it's so crucial and clearly confusing. Based on the sources, especially LendingTree's warnings versus the NCN's info on the adjustment, can we try to crystallize the advice? When is consolidating definitely needed for PSLF, and when should you be super cautious?
Let's try. Okay, first, the mandatory part. If you have older Federal Family Education Loan, FFEL program loans, Federal Perkins loans, or Parent PLUS loans, and you want them to be eligible for PSLF, you generally must consolidate them into a direct consolidation loan. That's the only way to make those loan types eligible for the required IDR plans.
Okay, FFEL, Perkins, Parent PLUS equals consolidation needed for PSLF eligibility. Pretty clear.
Right. Now, the tricky part, what if you already have direct loans, maybe multiple direct loans, and maybe you've already made some qualifying PSLF payments on them? Should you consolidate those?
This is where the resetting the clock fear comes in.
Exactly. The traditional rule and the warning from LendingTree is that consolidating existing direct loans that have qualifying PSLF payments can cause you to lose the credit for those payments on the new consolidated loan. The count could reset to zero for those loans.
But didn't we just talk about the one-time payment count adjustment potentially fixing past consolidation issues?
Yes, and that's the major source of nuance and confusion right now. The adjustment is intended to give credit for past periods of qualifying employment, even potentially overriding previous consolidation resets for those past periods. So if you consolidated direct loans years ago and lost payment counts, the adjustment might restore them.
Might.
However, it's less clear how consolidation of direct loans impacts counts going forward, or how it works if you consolidate now. Does consolidating direct loans today still risk resetting the clock for future payments, even if the adjustment fixes the past? The safest assumption, based on the caution in sources like LendingTree, is that consolidating direct loans with existing PSLF progress remains potentially risky for preserving that specific count, unless you're very early in repayment with few or no payments to lose.
So the most cautious approach seems to be consolidate the non-direct loans, FFEL, Perkins, Parent PLUS, because you have to. But think very, very carefully and maybe avoid consolidating direct loans that already have significant PSLF payment history unless you have confirmation that the adjustment will protect your account or you have very few payments at stake.
That seems to be the most prudent interpretation of the combined sources right now. It's a situation where getting personalized advice is really key.
Are there any pros to consolidating direct loans besides potentially simplifying to one payment?
Well, simplification is one potential pro if you have many loans. Consolidation can also give access to a longer repayment term, maybe up to 30 years, which could lower the monthly payment. But since PSLF requires you to be on an IDR plan anyway, and IDR already bases your payment on income, often resulting in a lower payment, the longer term itself isn't usually the main draw for PSLF seekers. The primary reasons to consolidate are usually making ineligible loans eligible or streamlining multiple loans.
And the cons, again, just to be clear, especially for direct loans with history.
The big potential con is losing your accumulated qualifying payment count on those specific loans, potentially setting you back years, unless the adjustment fully protects you, which is the uncertain part. Also, the interest rate on a consolidation loan is the weighted average of the underlying loans, rounded up to the nearest 18th percent, so it could slightly increase your rate. And if you take a longer term and don't end up getting PSLF, you'll pay more interest over time.
Okay. So, summing up consolidation for PSLF, necessary for FFEL, Perkins Parent PFLS, potentially risky for direct loans with existing payment counts. Makes most sense for direct loans if you're very early in repayment or need to simplify many loans and understand the count implications.
That captures it well. And the crucial advice from LendingTree. If you are unsure at all about how consolidation impacts your specific loans and PSLF progress, talk to your servicer or the Department of Education's resources before you consolidate. It's generally irreversible.
Don't click that button without being sure. Good advice. Okay, let's zoom out a bit. PSLF is a federal program created by Congress, run by the Department of Education, but it exists in a political world, right? Things change. What do our sources tell us about the recent political and regulatory climate surrounding PSLF? Any big shifts or debates happening?
Yes, this is important context because it affects how the program operates and what borrowers experience. There's been quite a bit of activity recently. First, as we touched on, new Department of Education regulations specifically for PSLF took effect on July 1st, 2023.
And those were generally borrower-friendly changes.
Yes. According to the National Council of Nonprofit source, these regs did things like expand the types of payments that can qualify, allowing certain deferment forbearance periods, lump sum payments, even some late payments to count under certain conditions. They also clarify definitions, like for full-time work and qualifying employer, and they formally established a process for borrowers to request reconsideration if their PSLF application is denied. The goal was also to improve automation and tracking.
So, efforts to streamline and make it easier to qualify.
That was the intent. And building directly on that is the big one-time payment count adjustment we discussed, which the department is rolling out, aiming to finish by September 2024. This is a massive undertaking to correct past inaccuracies and give credit for periods that previously didn't count, helping many people get closer to or achieve forgiveness.
Okay, so regulatory changes and the count adjustment seem positive for borrowers, but the sources also mentioned court cases and other actions causing some turbulence.
Right, there's some complexity here. The NCN source mentions a federal appeals court ruling from February 2025. This ruling kept in place a block and injunction against the early forgiveness parts of the SAVE repayment plan. This is the part of SAVE that offered forgiveness after just 10 or 20 years of payments for some borrowers based on their original loan balance, which is separate from the 10 years of public service work required for PSLF.
Okay, so the court case was about SAVE's own early forgiveness, not PSLF forgiveness. But you said it impacted PSLF borrowers. How?
Yeah, this is where the ripple effects come in. Because the SAVE plan is a qualifying IDR plan for PSLF, and it offers the lowest payment for many, the legal challenge created uncertainty. According to the NCN source, and reflected in Reddit posts discussing Mahila's website, the Department of Education initially responded by temporarily pausing the processing of all new IDR plan applications and direct consolidation loan applications.
Paused everything. Why would blocking early forgiveness under SAVE stop someone from just enrolling in SAVE for PSLF purposes or consolidating?
It seems like a broad, possibly overly cautious administrative reaction to the ongoing litigation. The sources indicate that while processing for the older IDR plans, IBR, PAYE, ICR, has since resumed if borrowers provide income documentation, the processing for new SAVE plan applications and requests for the lowest payment option, which often defaults to SAVE, were still on hold as of the information cutoff for our sources.
So people trying to get onto SAVE for PSLF or needing to consolidate to become eligible might be stuck in limbo, put into administrative forbearance while they wait for SAVE processing to fully resume.
Exactly. That's the situation described. It's causing delays and anxiety for PSLF seekers who need to get on the right plan or consolidate their loans, all stemming from a court case about a different feature of the CDE plan.
Yeah.
It highlights how interconnected and sometimes fragile these systems can be.
Wow. Bureaucracy in action. Okay,
Yeah.
What about actions aimed directly at PSLF itself? There was mention of an executive order.
Yes, one source mentioned a White House executive order signed by President Trump on March 7, 2025. This order directs the Secretary of Education to revise the eligibility rules for PSLF.
Revise them how? What's the stated goal?
The fact sheet accompanying the EO states the purpose is to ensure the program doesn't subsidize organizations involved in certain activities deemed to have a substantial illegal purpose. It lists things like advancing illegal immigration, terrorism, child abuse, certain types of discrimination, or causing public disruptions. It frames this as correcting alleged misuse of the program and targeting funding for certain activists.
So it sounds like an attempt to potentially narrow the definition of a qualifying employer based not just on their nonprofit or government status, but on the nature of their activities.
That appears to be the stated goal. However, and this is really crucial context from the National Council of Nonprofits, source, the executive order itself does not immediately change PSLF eligibility. It's a directive to start a process to revise the rules through future regulations.
It's not self-executing.
Correct. Making actual changes would require going through the formal federal rulemaking process, which includes public comment, and can take a long time. Furthermore, the NCN source points out that an executive order cannot override the actual law passed by Congress. The current PSLF statute explicitly includes 501c organizations as qualifying employers without these kinds of activity-based restrictions mentioned in the EO's fact sheet.
So the EO signals a policy direction or intent for the future, but the current PSLF rules defined by Congress and existing regulations are still in effect, and changing them would be a whole separate, lengthy process.
That's the key takeaway. The program is operating under the current law and regulations. The NCN source notes that the Department of Education did announce in April 2025 that it plans to start the negotiated rulemaking process for various higher education programs, including PSLF, and specifically mentioned an intent to refine definitions of a qualifying employer. So the conversation about employer definitions is beginning, potentially influenced by the EO's direction, but no changes have actually happened yet.
Okay, so the overall picture is PSLF is active, recent regulatory changes, and the count adjustment are generally helpful. But administrative delays are happening due to related issues like the SAVE lawsuit, and there's political signaling about potential future changes to eligibility, but nothing immediate. Staying informed sounds key.
Absolutely. It's a program that's working and forgiving debt for many, but it's definitely operating in a dynamic environment.
Now, after hearing all of this, the complexity, the potential frustrations, the changing landscape, what if someone listening realizes, you know what, despite my public service job, PSLF just isn't going to work for me. Maybe their loans aren't eligible and consolidation isn't right. Maybe they were on the wrong plan too long and the adjustment won't cover it. Are there other options mentioned? Alternatives?
Yes, the sources do briefly mention that PSLF isn't the only path. Other federal student loan repayment options and even some other forgiveness programs exist, though they have different requirements and may not offer the same level of benefit as PSLF for public servants. Exploring all the IDR plans is still a good idea, as they can make payments manageable and offer forgiveness after 20 or 25 years of payments, regardless of employer.
What about refinancing? We hear ads for that all the time. Lower your interest rate.
Refinancing is definitely an option, primarily offered by private lenders like banks or online companies. You take out a new private loan to pay off your existing federal loans or other private loans. If you have good credit and income, you might qualify for a lower interest rate or a different repayment term.
But there's a huge catch if you have federal loans and are considering refinancing, right? Especially regarding PSLF.
A critical, irreversible catch. This cannot be emphasized enough. If you refinance your federal student loans into a private loan, they are no longer federal loans. They become purely private debt.
Which means?
Which means you permanently lose eligibility for all federal student loan benefits and protections associated with those loans. That includes access to any of the income-driven repayment plans, IBR, PayYE, SAVE, ICR, eligibility for federal deferment or forbearance programs, like during unemployment or economic hardship, and crucially, any possibility of receiving public service loan forgiveness or IDR forgiveness down the road.
So refinancing federal loans is a one-way street. You might get a lower rate, but you give up the federal safety net and forgiveness options forever.
Exactly. If there is any chance that PSLF or needing an IDR plan could be beneficial for you now or in the future, refinancing your federal loans into private ones is generally a very risky move. You should only consider it if you are absolutely certain you won't need or qualify for federal programs.
That is a massive warning label. Okay. So given all this complexity, PSLF rules, consolidation traps, IDR plans, refinancing risks, it sounds overwhelming. Are there places people can go for trustworthy, personalized advice?
Yes. Thankfully, you don't have to figure this all out in a vacuum.
Yeah.
The sources mentioned several reputable resources for help. MMI, the provider of one of the articles, offers student loan counseling services. The National Council of Nonprofits also specifically recommended the Institute of Student Loan Advisors, TISLA, which is often called TISLA, and the Student Borrower Protection Center, SBPC. These organizations specialize in helping borrowers understand their options and navigate the system.
So TISLA, SBPC, maybe MMI, places that can look at your specific loans, your employment, your situation, and help you make the best decisions.
Exactly. Getting expert, unbiased advice tailored to your personal circumstances is highly recommended before making big decisions like consolidating or potentially refinancing, especially with PSLF on the line. It can help you avoid very costly mistakes.
Okay, that's good to know. Help is available. We have covered a ton of ground here. We've dug into what PSLF is, who qualifies, the tricky details about loans and payments and IDR plans, the vital importance of certifying employment, what happens at the finish line, the very real struggles and frustrations people face based on those Reddit stories, the consolidation maze, the shifting political and legal backdrop, and alternatives like refinancing with major warnings. Let's try to boil it all down. What are the absolute key takeaways for you listening right now?
If I had to pick the most critical things, PSLF rests on 3 pillars working together for 10 years. 1. Consistent full-time work for a qualifying employer that's government, or generally a 501c3 nonprofit. 2. Having the right loans, federal direct loans. This often means you must consolidate older FFEL, Perkins, or Parent PLUS loans. 3. Making 120 qualifying monthly payments, and the vast majority of those must be made while you're enrolled in a qualifying income-driven repayment IDR plan.
And don't just assume you're on track. You have to actively manage the process. Use the PSLF help tool on studentaid.gov. Verify your employer. Submit that employment certification form, ECF, every single year, and when you change jobs. This is non-negotiable for tracking progress and catching errors early. And keep your own copies of everything.
Be incredibly careful and get advice before consolidating, especially if you already have direct loans with existing PSLF payments. Understand how the rules, including the current payment count adjustment, impact your specific situation. And know that while the program faces challenges, both administrative based on borrower experiences and potentially political down the road, it is active, it is forgiving massive amounts of debt, and recent changes have aimed to make it more accessible.
Persistence really seems key here. The Reddit stories show it can be a long, sometimes incredibly frustrating road full of hoops to jump through, but they also show that achieving that forgiveness at the end is profoundly life-changing for so many people dedicating their careers to public service.
Absolutely. So for you listening, Taken, go to studentaid.gov, log in, and check your exact loan types. Use the PSLF help tool to check your current and past employers, verify you're on an eligible IDR plan, and make submitting that ECF annually a routine part of your financial life if PSLF is your goal.
So, as we see these rules continue to shift and the debate around student debt and the value of public service evolves, it leaves you wondering, doesn't it? What does the future really hold for programs designed to incentivize and support careers dedicated to the public good? And how will borrowers continue to navigate this intricate, sometimes maddening, but potentially incredibly rewarding path towards freedom from student debt?